I work in a lamp store. For some bloody reason, I am supposed to take night shifts now. Simply reading the title, you might be wondering right now, why the hell would a store selling lamps even be opened at night? I know, because that is exactly what I asked my boss when he offered me the so-called promotion. When do you think people need light the most? You silly goose. When it is dark out, of course. I am not gonna lie. I didn't appreciate the way he talked to me, but luckily we were hardly ever inside at the same time. Mainly because it was such a tiny store, you could only ever be inside with 2 or a maximum of 3 individuals without breaking a light while making a turn. Being cooped up in there with him wouldn't exactly be my fantasy. To call my boss Mr. Nips eccentric would be the literal definition of the word understatement. And his personality was reflected in each and every light bulb and lamp inside this tiny store on Evergreen Avenue. I fell in love with it when I saw the shiny colors in the storefront that very first time I moved to this town. The store was right next door to a pub that we only visited once, and even though I may have been slightly intoxicated, I could have sworn I'd never seen such beautiful art in the form of light. And that was only from the outside. Hell, did I know that I could have simply walked in that night, seeing that we are apparently open at those times. I did, however, wait until 2 days later when my hangover had passed, but not my curiosity, unfortunately. Miserably drained wallet. Because you see, when I came in during the day, the lights were off but the architecture of the lamps stood. It was the very first time I met this peculiar man named Mr. Nips. I reached my hand for this gorgeous lamp that was entirely made out of broken mirror pieces when I looked to my right and noticed his pointy nose, which was perfectly in line with his only slightly less pointy chin. I looked up and met his eyes, and he smiled, but it was that typical sleazy salesman smile. He didn't speak but pointed towards a sign. Please do not touch the lamps before purchase. Sorry. I mumbled. It's a really nice lamp. They all are. Do you make these? He shook his head. No dear. I simply have a good eye for them. And the right nose. It also tells me this lamp might be a little off your budget. He winked. I would have been offended if he hadn't been entirely correct. This lamp cost more than most of my furniture together, and knowing myself, it probably wouldn't have survived more than a few days with me anyway. I smiled a polite smile and got ready to take off when Mr. Nips offered to change that problem of mine. In time. Of course. You seem to have a good eye too. Not sure about the nose, but I can't be fussy. Would you like to work for me here? I certainly wouldn't be working just to afford one lamp. However, I did need work, and this seemed like the perfect place to spend some time while helping the occasional customer that might stumble in. I accepted there and then. It wasn't much to think through. I needed money and had a lot of free time in between writing. Mr. Nips gave me the quickest tour, taught me how the register worked, and honestly, that was mostly it. Of course, I was worried, but after working a few shifts alone inside the store full of art in the form of light, I realized something essential. Nobody ever came in here with the intention to buy, and if they did, they left after seeing the prices. Of course, the best time to visit us would be late in the afternoon or early in the evening, when the combination of deep green, warm red, and bright blue would light up the walls and the ceiling. That's when a few customers would stumble in. They enjoyed the views, had a chat or two, and left again. I did like those times best. During the day it just felt like a regular boring store, but when it got dark, it became a whole different world. I never worked later than 7 though, and so I usually didn't have much time to enjoy it. I believe that during all those months that I worked for Mr. Nips, I only ever sold a few light bulbs and a couple of the discount lamps. I never did ask him how the store was able to run as long as I received my paychecks each month. And with the store being empty most times, I also had lots of time to study. Now, after the initial confusion as to why we would sell lamps at night, I decided not to ask any more questions. Because, for one, Mr. Nips never ever gave answers to my satisfaction, and second, because the pay would be double of what I make now. I couldn't care less why this old gentleman wanted to be open even more to sell even less, but it was none of my business. So I made my way through the dark to the one shop lighting up the entire street. To start my first night shift, I would learn over time that work was surprisingly booming at night. I assumed that Mr. Nips would be there when I arrived, but the door was locked. I grabbed my key and opened up. While I'd never worked at night, I did spend evenings here at times when it was dark out already in autumn and winter. Still, at this particular time, the Evergreen lamp store had a mysterious vibe to it. The lights were shining so warm. Some colors were bright, others felt matte, but it only added to the feeling of coziness. I went behind the counter, logged into the register, and took a seat on the stool. I got the book that I brought from my bag, turned on some music, and got ready for a long night. Before I knew it, 2 hours had passed already without a single customer walking inside, which, to be fair, was not exactly surprising. I got up from my stool and walked up to the door to open it and see if the pub next door was at least open. I heard some faint music coming from next door, and I believe there were some people walking outside, but I couldn't tell for sure. The entire street was pitch black. Not even a single street lamp lit up the area. The only light was coming from this peculiar lamp store that I was standing inside, which meant that I couldn't point out anyone, but they could all see me. I took a step back and closed the door. This was the first time that I felt a sense of fear. Only then something inside of me seemed to click. Why exactly had I believed this situation to be acceptable? This was nowhere near regular. This wasn't a diner, a truck stop, or a convenience store, but a place that sells lamps for duck's sake. No soul could be thinking, well, this is the proper time to go and buy a luxurious crystal lampstand. And I hardly knew anything about Mr. Nips at all. Why are you only now starting to wake up? I lifted my head and noticed an older gentleman in the store. His ash-gray hair was half hidden underneath a purple top hat. He was wearing thick round glasses and held a pocket watch in his hand. When did you come inside? I didn't even hear you. He chuckled. I noticed. You seemed quite distracted. I do not believe I have seen you in here before. My name is George Golter and I come here quite regularly. I usually only work day shifts. I am Riley. I tried to smile, but I felt a strange sensation come over me. This whole situation felt so absurd. Oh, what a lovely name. Riley. Now I am glad to see some new eyes. The regular fella can be quite rough. Dear Riley, could you help me? Help you with what? I asked. He laughed again. Well, I would like to purchase a lamp. Isn't that what this store is for? He raised an eyebrow. Yes, of course. Sorry. I laughed. I honestly didn't expect any customers around this time, I suppose. But you're the only light around. Where else would we go? He started walking around the small store, which suddenly seemed far bigger than it ever looked to my eyes before. Do you already have something specific in mind? I asked while trying to act as normal as possible. Yes, glass. Shattered. Excuse me. He came closer. His eyes were piercing right through mine. You know which one I am talking about. Don't act dumb. I opened my mouth but no words came out. I did know which one he was talking about. The lamp made out of broken mirror pieces that I had my eyes on. Without saying anything, I guided him towards the small nightstand lamp. Splendid. It is even better than I expected. But, great. I mumbled. Just happy that he would be getting the hell out of here soon. So I guess we come to the next point now. There are 3 prospective receivers currently. A former actor stuck inside a loop he can't seem to get out of. He is sucked into sick games, kidnapping, and drugs, but, honestly, he is tough and I believe he can take more of it. Then we have the lovely lady whose entire life has consisted of being a research rabbit. She has thick skin. She will be fine. You want me to help you pick who gets the lamp? Are those friends of yours? He shook his head. Oh no. They are interesting individuals who are in need of some future perspective. I had no idea what he was talking about. What about the third? I asked. Oh yes. My personal favorite. She is a trickster. Has cost many humans their life. I believe she sells the organs that they are so fond of. Who are they? My breathing was getting heavier. Why did everything he said sound so familiar to me when it was so entirely insane? It was almost as if he was speaking in a language that I knew but forgot. Why do we have to pick one? I asked. He shrugged. Balance of the universe, I guess. Not everyone can have bad luck all the time. The lamp gives them bad luck. 7 years to be precise, he grinned. I grabbed the lamp that was standing right in front of us now. In its light, Golter didn't look like a friendly grandfather anymore. His skin was full of holes, his eyes a poisonous yellow, and the top hat reeked of death. No. I whispered. Your choice, dumb child. He said in a loud, manic tone. I held the lamp tight and took a step back. Go away. I cried and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, he was gone, but the lamp was still in my hand. Although now it appeared less silver and instead more red. What is going on? I whispered to myself before realizing that the lamp wasn't red. It was my own blood that was tainting the glass. My hands were full of cuts. I dropped the lamp, expecting it to shatter into a million pieces, but it didn't. It lay there on the floor looking just like before, except that my blood kept dripping on top of it. Drip, drip, drip. I started seeing stars and the lights of the store all became one while my body was frozen. What is going on? I repeated again, not expecting that anyone would answer. However, in my blurry mind, I again hadn't noticed that somebody came in. I assumed George Golter had come back. They grabbed the lamp off the ground. Be careful. I whispered, even if I couldn't care less if the weird old man hurt himself as well. You should be telling that to yourself. I heard the person speak. It was a different voice, a much younger and more pleasant one. I looked up and realized that the eyes in front of me were deep green and friendly. I was greeted by a smile that looked both nice and worried. Help me, was all I could say. I felt like I would pass out any second, but he didn't come closer. Instead, he walked towards the door. Give it to the third one. I heard from a distance. As he said those words, my vision became clear again. The cuts were gone and so was the blood. For a second I assumed that I had fallen asleep and this was nothing but a bad dream, but the young man with the green eyes was still there. I could see him much clearer now. Who are you? What the hell just happened? He came closer, but his eyes looked far less friendly now. I am Leon. I usually work nights here. I told that old bastard that he couldn't simply throw you in the cold water, but he's so stubborn. Was I just bleeding? Yeah. And you would have died too if I wasn't there. Listen, if somebody wants to buy a lamp, you must help and sell. If you don't, It will hit you instead and much more concentrated too. What do you mean by it? The bad luck. Riley, these are just some shitty lamps. I laughed. This is insane. Tell Nips I quit. Leon sighed. Look, I can't do all of this again. You choose to not come here anymore. You promise yourself you won't. I do that every day, but when the lights turn dark I always show up again. He shrugged. All we can do is pick the right ones to receive bad luck. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Whatever was going on, I needed to be far away from it. You can try and leave, go home where you came from, but be honest. Riley, do you remember where that is? Holy shit. Thanks for shedding some light on this whole underworld. There is a lamp store a mile from my house that is open at night. Really. It's absolutely gorgeous when you see it from the road after dark. I've always wanted to go in. I've also always wanted to not get caught up in a supernatural web of murder and deceit though. Decisions. Amiri. Well, that's a wow. Okay, I am ready for more.